So you're done choosing your ability scores, but what's next?
Now it's time to choose the race and class for your Dungeons & Dragons character. Hi there, I'm Monty Martin.
And I'm McLaughlin.
And we are the Dungeon Dudes.
On today's episode, we're going to be looking at the next step in filling out your character sheet, and that is choosing your race and class.
Yeah, in this video, we're going to assume that you've already figured out how to generate your character's ability scores before moving along. So if you haven't done that yet, you actually might want to step back to the previous video so that you're all up to speed for the rest of this episode.
So there's a lot of different options for races and classes in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. These are going to be things that you are going to use to define what type of adventurer you're going to be.
Yeah, the first is your character's race, which really refers to what species of fantasy creature your character is. Of course, the option is always there to just play a human, which is what we know and understand really, really well. But of course, in the worlds of Dungeons & Dragons, they are filled with all manner of elves, dwarves, halflings, orcs, and even more fantastical creatures like half-dragons and half-demons.
Yeah, and you can actually have a lot of fun exploring these different options. One thing that I always recommend is don't be afraid to make something that may seem out of the ordinary. You may want to go along the lines of a half-orc fighter who is obviously going to be very big and strong. But that doesn't mean that you can't make a halfling fighter just the same. If it sounds fun to you, run with it.
Yeah. When you're choosing your character's class, this is going to define what skills, powers, and other abilities your character has, whether they're tools for solving problems that you might find in dungeons, or your character's ability to fight and defeat enemies in combat. Your choice of class is going to determine your character's approach to these types of situations. It can be everything from a scholarly wizard who is master of many different spells, to a vicious half-orc fighter like Kelly was talking about, who solves most of his problems using violence.
Another thing to keep in mind when you're choosing your class and race is you want to talk to the other players at the table, and you want to talk to the DM. You want to know what the setting is like, what races and classes might be best suited, and what's everybody else playing, because you may want to play something a little different than the other people at the table.
At the same time, there's no need to think about playing the best character or even setting up the most optimal party by getting everyone into your group to choose races and classes that they're not really interested in playing, but you're just trying to find this ideal ultimate party that's going to steamroll all the encounters. Dungeons & Dragons can be played that way, but that's more of the type of thing that we go to video games for these days. Dungeons & Dragons is an opportunity to make something truly unique, fun, and rewarding, and so explore all of those things. That said, you still don't want your characters to be a bunch of skillless, incompetent fools, even though really most D&D characters and campaigns kind of end up seeming that way. They still have to kind of be heroes who are good at something.
One thing I really like to do, and a very big recommendation for those of you who are new to this concept, is use something from literature or video games or movies that you really connect with. If there's a character from Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, or maybe your favorite superhero, you can usually find a way to incorporate that into a D&D character. Not necessarily word for word, but just use those as inspiration.
And the D&D character classes and races are really, really adaptable. And if you've got a really creative DM, they might be willing to help you rethink about how the D&D classes work in what's called reflavoring, where you change the way the abilities of the character class are described, but you still keep the same rules. For instance, in one of Kelly's campaigns, we were pirates on the high seas, and my character was a gunslinging wizard who, instead of a spell book, had a bunch of magical bullets that he loaded into his six-shooter and cast the spells whenever he fired the gun.
None of the rules changed for that. He still cast spells using the same rules, but we just added flavor text to make it more unique and more interesting for him.
Yeah, so whenever I got to cast Fireball, I described it as loading the really special silver and fiery bullet into my weapon and launching it forward. My character didn't have a very good dexterity score, but was using magic in arcane means to create these fantastic images. So it's a great way of changing things around while still playing within the rules of Dungeons & Dragons.
So talk to your DM and players and have a lot of fun choosing your class and race.
Yeah, once you've chosen your character's race and class, you can write those down on your character sheet and assign your ability scores however you see fit. The Player's Handbook does give you recommendations for each class about which ability scores you want to focus on, and at this point you'll be able to move forward with picking your character's skills and filling out all of their other powers and abilities.
So now you've picked your race and class, and you've found something that really speaks to the personality of the character you want to play.
Yeah, I think it's a really good idea at this stage of the process to take some time to look through the Player's Handbook, right? Find the things that inspire you in it from your own reading list, from games you might have played before or movies you might have seen, so you can choose a character that really speaks to you. After all, unless something tragic happens, you're going to be spending a fair amount of time playing this character, so it should be something that you're really going to love playing.
But nothing tragic ever happens to player characters.
In Dungeons & Dragons? Certainly not. Now, that said, now that you've picked your character's ability scores and their race and their class, it's time to move on to the next step, where you're going to be figuring out your character's skills, attacks, and spell casting. We prepared a whole video for you on that right over here.
And if you want tips and tricks to create a truly awesome character, we have that video right over here.
Yeah, if you like what we've been doing, you can become a patron of our show by following the links right down below.
Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss an episode.
Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time
in the dungeon.